Hello, happy August, and welcome back to Last Week with Nora. This is my second episode, so second week recapping my watches, and thankfully have a lot to talk about today as I pretty much crammed all my favorite viewings unintentionally for the month this last week of July. Very fruitful, very, very good. And again, there's really no rhyme, reason, or logic as to how I navigate my viewing schedule. A lot of times it is motivated by the actors with whom I'm obsessed. Not always. Still having a hard time keeping up with the current releases and watches, even though you would think it would be easy to see them working at a theater. It is not. But without further ado, let's get into it. So I just want to make some honorable mentions to the other films I watched today that did not quite make the cut for my favorite of the week. So those would be Safe, directed by Todd Haynes, also starring Julianne Moore. And it's funny, when I watched it before, because I watched it before the one I'm ultimately gonna pick, and I was like, wouldn't it be funny? What are the coincidences and the chances of me making 2 episodes in a row, not only with Julianne Moore in the lead, but directed by Todd Haynes? Thankfully it didn't happen. So Safe, and then my other runner-up would be The Piano Teacher, which was a film I'd been meaning to get around to for a while. Just hadn't really found the right sort of mood or tone, like, personally. Like, I don't know. I was one of those films I was like, I'll know when I'm ready to watch it, and I felt ready the other day, and so I watched it. A fucking incredible performance by Izzy Huppert. I don't need to say anything more. If you haven't seen it, it's an interesting, at times challenging, but rewarding watch. So finally, drumroll please. My movie of the week is The Birds by Alfred Hitchcock, which, interestingly enough, despite my very cultured upbringing and my parents' love of Hitchcock, I'd never seen until literally this past weekend. Grew up in Psycho, Vertigo, all of his Rear Window, all his later career, like, Technicolor works, I guess you could say, mainstream Hitchcock. I'd never seen The Birds. I knew about it, obviously, even before I decided to pursue a career in film, since it's pretty, it's pretty recognizable in the public cultural canon. But it was real fun. A couple of my friends told me he was playing at Cinespia, the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, and I'd never actually gone to one of those events, so I'm like, alright, 2 birds, 1 stone, gonna check out a new cinema event, and I'm gonna watch a new movie. So it was great. First of all, super comfy setup. We had our little blankets and our tarp and our pillows and our food and picnic, and I honestly didn't know what to expect. Like, I knew obviously that it was a horror, but in the world of Hitchcock, horror can take on so many different identities, if you will, and confuses so many other genres to be something entirely different. So I'm watching and I'm initially struck by how fucking funny it is. Obviously humor is not a foreign concept to Hitchcock films in particular, but also darker films. But I didn't realize there were so many black comedic elements within The Birds. And just the way it felt more artificial than any other Hitchcock film I'd seen, but like in an intentional way. Not in like a gaudy way that detracted from its effect or whatsoever, but more like, it's the 60s, but it's still in that kind of overlap of that very keeping up with the Joneses, like conformity, conservative, like ideal aspect, kind of like Far From Heaven in a way. And it shows, and the Technicolor really brings that out. But the lines that some of these characters are saying are so clipped, and it's just like, and ridiculous too. It's like normal people wouldn't comport this way, and of course, what is normal? It's all relative, and of course this is within the cinematic landscape. It's just a different reality in and of itself, but that's what struck me the most. And it was also interesting too, of course, getting later into the actual horror elements with the birds attacking for me, that was, I had to actually step back in that moment and remind myself, you know, in 1963, this was groundbreaking, not only for like the composite editing, but also because it was terrifying. Like, no one had seen anything like it. And as a critic, and a scholar of film, one thing I always try to do whenever I'm assessing any film is to view it through the lens of the time in which it was made. Also, you know, contemporarily speaking too, but because I initially was like, this is not scary at all. But that's because I am someone who was born in the 90s and has grown up with, you know, kind of the maturation of CGI and special effects and really, really stuff that we take for granted that's kind of insane that they didn't have back then. And so after I kind of placated myself and reset my mindset to be like, okay, no, like this is, think about it as if you were a brand new audience member viewing it for the first time in 63. I can absolutely, yeah, I mean, it was very sort of the same kind of fear instilling that Jaws had, you know, using this nature, how this animalistic sort of uncontrollable, outside the realm of human, if you will, the word I'm looking for, but yeah, outside of the realm of like human control. And it's really, I kind of love that it's inexplicable. You know, obviously there's like the loose connection to Tippi Hedren's character, but we don't precisely know what or why this has been engendered with the birds. Obviously the lovebirds are probably like the MacGuffin here, but, and of course the ending, I have to say, I really love the open-endedness, the ominous feeling. Like, you don't know. You could, if you're an optimist, you could choose to see it in a good light, but for the most part, yeah, you're just like, okay, it's only a matter of time, you know, one of those things. But what I really wanted to talk about and step back is the surprisingly forward and bountiful amount of queer subtext that's present. And of course, I'm always putting out my feelers for that because that's my specialty, my niche. And was kind of blindsided when Suzanne Pleshette's character comes into play. And though her role ultimately is pretty minimal, and you know, after the first couple interactions where Tippi Hedren's staying at her house, she kind of disappears off to the wayside. But within those moments, just there's no way that any of this was coincidental. Just the gazes, and that's what I mean. While everyone is speaking these almost preconceived bits of dialogue, almost like performing within the performance, everything is expressed in these glances and these gazes. And she's just kind of looking at Tippi Hedren, and she's doing a little smolder. And you know, as we know, my memory is not the best, so I don't have the script on me. I'm not quoting this verbatim, but you know, she makes a clip where like Tippi Hedren's like, "Can I stay here for the night?" She's like, "Oh, really? Only the night? I was looking for someone long term." This sort of, you know, very subversive, very like tongue-in-cheek, kind of flirty, like, and of course, you know, the short hair, being a single unmarried school teacher, and this was being released 2 years after The Children's Hour. I mean, it's just this, I kept, my friends too, all of us queers, we just kept like slapping each other and looking at each other. And my friends had seen it before, and they were just like, I can't believe I didn't remember how gay this was. But I was just totally taken by that. And I, you know, it works even better because I just feel like Rod Taylor is just such the everyman, and so nondescript and whatever. And the leading romance between him and Tippi Hedren, if you want to call it that, doesn't really amount to anything. It doesn't really have any of these sparks. It's like she has way more chemistry with Suzanne Pleshette. So that was a great takeaway for me. And of course, like, Hitchcock's been known to do queer a lot in his films, but to see this as a continuing pattern when I was least expecting it, was really a delight. I really enjoyed the film. Obviously, the queer supplemental edition helped, but just in general, and I'm kind of glad, you know, even though, of course, there's a part of me that's remorseful I didn't see it earlier, it's one of those films where I'm lucky to approach it now with the knowledge I have, with the experience I have, and otherwise, you know, I think I could have had a predilection for bias, emotional bias, memory bias, you know, because we do take into account like how we perceive things and experience things when we're younger, and that's not for better or for worse. I do think that emotional expression in film criticism is important because it's that personal subjectivity that really becomes your voice and what you're trying to say and convey. And so, with all that being said, thanks for tuning in, and I will see you next week. Bye.